Xi Jinping, a biography, written by Zhong Wen. Chapter 7 One Belt One Road and Aborted Projects. As soon as Xi Jinping came to power in 2013, he was ambitious enough to begin to unleash his dream of greatness, under the name China Dream, on the international community. He proposed the One Belt, One Road unprecedented international leap forward plan. With the wealth and foreign exchange reserves accumulated during the reform and opening up of the Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao eras, Xi has been trying to achieve the ambition of world domination that Mao Zedong failed to achieve. Xi Jinping's transnational economic belt covers China's historical Silk Road and maritime Silk Road, including the whole of Asia, the Indian Ocean coast, the Mediterranean coast, Africa, South America, and countries in the Atlantic region. In addition to the US and Western countries in Europe, Xi Jinping's ambition is to implement his international grand strategy through the Belt and Road to manipulate countries economically and politically so that he can establish a community of human destiny under his control. This is to separate himself from the US. He creates another so-called Chinese model. As of March 2021, China has signed 200 Belt and Road cooperation documents with 141 countries and 31 international organizations. China's investment capital is estimated at more than $500 billion. Most of the Belt and Road projects lack economic efficiency and are caught in a debt trap. There is no benefit for the Chinese people and there is a lot of resentment in the country for the big money spreading. According to statistics, of the 1,674 projects invested in 66 countries, it is obvious that there are troubles and so 234 projects are in bad shape. The whole Belt and Road project is recognized as a huge failure in terms of performance from both domestic and international evaluation angles. In May 2014, anti-Chinese demonstrations in Vietnam protested against China's unilateral oil drilling in the South China Sea. The riot caused the deaths of 6 Chinese employees and over 100 were injured. Xi Jinping's Belt and Road madness has caused a sharp rise in the number of conflicts between the locals and the Chinese. Chinese embassies abroad handled 60,000 cases of Chinese requesting protection and assistance in 2014 alone, involving 73,000 Chinese people. In June 2015, Overseas reported that China's investment in a casino, hotel and entertainment resort complex in the Atlantic Bahamas had collapsed with the $3.5 billion investment going down the drain. 3,000 employees were hired for these projects and they were just laid off. In May 2016, Overseas reported that China had invested $7.5 billion in Venezuela to build 468 kilometers of railroad tracks and that construction had been halted and rotted for years, leaving the site in ruins. Sri Lanka's Chinese-invested Hambantota port, Hambantota, has poor economic performance and is not operating as expected. It owes a huge debt to China which cannot be repaid, forcing it to cede its territorial sovereignty, with China acquiring the right to use the port and the surrounding 15,000 acres of land for a 99-year lease. The Chinese Communist Party has always opposed imperialist aggression to establish leases, and now it is Xi Jinping's Red Empire's turn to establish leases in foreign countries. Tens of thousands of Sri Lankan protesters demonstrated in the capital city Colombo on September 5, 2018. They opposed the government's participation in China's Belt and Road project. Back in January 2017, already there were anti-communist demonstrations in Sri Lanka. Djibouti, a small African country, was forced to cede the port of Doralet due to its inability to repay Chinese loans, and the Chinese Communist Party then militarized the civilian port, establishing a naval base. China stationed additional warships and military personnel in the port, making it the first overseas military base of Xi Jinping's Red Empire. The Chinese Communist Party signed a $20 billion East China Sea high-speed rail project with Malaysia. In 2019, the new Prime Minister Mahathir re-evaluated the project when he came to power. He intentionally wanted to dismiss the high-speed rail project. China pleaded repeatedly to lower the price to $11 billion before Malaysia reluctantly agreed to keep the project and restart construction. With such a low price, the Chinese side is destined to suffer serious losses. The chairman of China Railway Corporation also admitted that the Moroccan high-speed rail project and the Polish highway project are also huge loss-making projects. Xi Jinping only wants his Red Empire to take root and establish bases in various countries in line with his grand international strategy for which he is willing to lose money. Xi has thus put the economy second to his political ambition. Xi Jinping invested $50 billion in loans in Venezuela. He was on hot terms with his leftist president, Chavez. Chavez was forced out of office amid popular opposition at home, leaving Xi's investment a bad debt, and it is not known at all how much he will recover. Xi Jinping has also invested $50 billion in the China-Pakistan corridor, a plan to build a China-Pakistan railroad through the mountains and no man's land to open up a direct land route for oil imports from Pakistani ports. The project is unprecedentedly difficult and it is not known whether it can be realized or become a bad deal. The Center for Global Development in Washington, D.C. has published a report in 2018 saying that 23 of the 68 countries participating in China's Belt and Road projects are highly indebted. Another 8 countries are at risk of high project debt. January 17, 2019. Another anti-China demonstration happened in Kyrgyzstan where hundreds of demonstrators marched to demand the deportation of Chinese, opposed Chinese debt and thoroughly investigated the collapse of a Chinese-maintained power plant. Further, in September 2019 anti-Chinese demonstrations broke out in several places in Kazakhstan against the Belt and Road, where demonstrators protested that the Belt and Road had plunged Kazakhstan into a debt crisis. On March 27, 2021, another 300 people held a rally in front of the Kazakh National Academy of Sciences to protest Chinese migration and expansion in Kazakhstan and called on the government to restrict China's rights in Kazakhstan. In April 2020, John Magufuli, the president of Tanzania in Africa, said that Tanzania would withdraw from the Belt and Road, pointing to the former president's agreement with China for the construction of the port, during which Tanzania had no right to have any input into the port, saying that only a drunk would accept such a clause. A July 2017 investigation by the Financial Times found that 18 high-speed rail projects worth $143 billion were secured by China, but 5, worth $47.5 billion, were later cancelled. Xi Jinping also plans to build the 100-kilometer Grand Clarion Canal in peninsular Malaysia connecting the Indian Ocean to the South China Sea with an investment of $25 billion. He also wants to build a 300-kilometer Grand Canal in Nicaragua, USA, with an investment of $50 billion, which can replace the US-controlled Panama Canal. This is his grand strategy to compete with the United States for supremacy. The Belt and Road is Xi Jinping's path to establishing a global empire. He wants to invest to manipulate many countries and export the China model of corruption and authoritarian surveillance to achieve his ambition of world domination. Pakistan's Diamo Basha Dam project, which was ready to be built with a cost of $14 billion, was cancelled in 2017 after Pakistan was dissatisfied with the harsh conditions that the dam would be owned by China and 17,000 laborers would be imported from China. Most of the Communist Party's Belt and Road projects are high-speed railroads, highways, ports, airports and other major infrastructure projects, but some countries don't even have many ordinary railroads and so they don't care whether they actually need them or not, and those that are urgently needed for people's livelihoods are left unattended. Chinese laborers are used in most of the construction projects in which the Chinese Communist Party is involved. When Chinese laborers go to foreign countries to work, they are like slave laborers under the communist dictatorship. Their passports are seized and detained. They have no personal freedom. They work overtime and have no holidays. They are not paid and are isolated from local communities. They are recruited by deception and false promises, are intimidated and threatened. Their labor protection and safety equipment are inadequate with poor living and working conditions. They are not provided with medical treatment for illness and injury. The Chinese government restricts workers' freedom of speech and punishes those who lead protests. Thus, the Chinese workers have no human rights at all. Many of the Belt and Road projects have not only posed huge debt risks for the participating countries but have also put China itself under financial pressure. Several countries deeply involved in Belt and Road projects have accumulated huge debts to China that have exceeded 10% of their GDP. They are under heavy pressure to repay their debts and are forced to accept the political and military demands of the Chinese Communist Party when they are unable to do so. The 417-kilometer high-speed railroad being built in Laos costs $5.6 billion, while Laos' 2015 GDP was only $12.3 billion, making it difficult to pay the debt, and in fact Laos does not need the high-speed railway. Meanwhile, China's foreign exchange reserves accumulated over the years have plummeted and China's financial credit has also declined. The domestic public is complaining about Xi Jinping's spreading money to the outside world, regardless of domestic poverty and the welfare of the people. The Belt and Road will not benefit the Chinese people in any way but is only Xi Jinping's personal political project, just as the Great Leap Forward was Mao's personal political project and the Three Gorges Dam was Li Peng's personal project. In order to train his Belt and Road agents in Africa, Xi Jinping has given the green light to African students by granting them high scholarships starting from tens of thousands of RMB to 100,000 to 200,000 renminbi a year. Xi Jinping not only provides higher than average standard dormitories for foreign students but also takes care of their lonely personal lives and mobilizes the Communist Youth League to organize Chinese female students to accompany them to take care of their personal lives and open the door for them to have promiscuous relationships with men and women. Many foreign students are rich and promoted and they do not do what they want, causing Chinese students to protest against the authorities' policies, such as the expulsion of foreign students from Wuhan University in 2020. In September 2017, Luo Jianbo, a professor of diplomacy at the Central Party School in Beijing, issued another warning: the focus should be on solving domestic problems, not on being a world leader. He pointed out, domestic problems are piling up and there is a lot of money to be spent, so don't dream of being a savior. In 2020, U.S. Vice President Pence described the Belt and Road as a belt of bondage, debt-bound participating countries, and a road of no return, rotten, withdrawal.